y'all, I'm really just trying to make sure that you get the information. It's not that like this needs to be a very hard, super hard test. The quizzes are going to be open notes. I want you to know the information and learn about it, have some knowledge before you leave here and they go, you came from School of Ag and you don't know how to do a fertilizer calculation? Because the next time a Tennessee Tech grad comes to their office and they don't know, our name goes down, you don't have a job anymore. And if you do know, when you get there and you do know, then you'll move up the ladder. So like, success in this class is also going to be success in your career. Any questions on this so far? Notice that this is not the last day. This is like the last, I want to say this is the last week of class. This is dead week. If for some reason, and I think we have to have a unanimous vote that we had that test on dead week. I think that's the way the rules are. I got screwed on dead week last semester, so I'm kind of learning this semester. Yo, if we need to move this to the week before or take it the final exam day, it's probably going to be online again. So super flexible. Anybody have any questions up until this point? Yes, ma'am.
Is exam 2 the final?
Yes.
Okay.
So the question was, is exam 2 the final? The answer is yes. You're going to have exam 1 and then exam 2. That's it. 500 points total in the class. 2 modules. Cool. This exam's going to be more in-depth because we're going to be going over the cycles. Madison loves doing the nitrogen cycle and oxidation states. But like, and so we might touch over on this in soils, but I'm just going to be like, hey guys, this is the nitrogen cycle. These are some of the processes we're going to end up moving on. But in this part, we're going to go a little more in depth. So the problem that I had was the students who took Dr. Branson or the students who took Mr. Livingston didn't get to take fertility. And so I almost had to redo and go all the way back to and start from the beginning in fertility. And that's what I'm kind of going to do for this. Like, I'm going to crunch fertility down into a more simpler package so that you leave here knowing the same thing that Madison does. Madison Phillips, because she's had my fertility class. Okay, so I want to make sure that y'all have the same advantage that she does. Any more questions here? Important dates. There's going to be no class on spring break. No class on Good Friday. April 30th is the last day of class. There's no attendance policy. So remember, most of us are going to be doing this online. I will still be here from 11:15 to 12:10 every Friday. I will also be available all day Friday. So if whenever you get home from whatever job you're working and you watch the video and you go, Natchez, I don't understand anything what you're talking about with this tetrahedral, octahedral stuff, email me, text me. If we have to get on a Zoom call, I have a board on my office at home. So I can instantly turn right into a classroom and curtail that specifically to whatever thing it is that you're doing. And we can have that one-on-one, the same that we get in this in-face classroom. So please, if you have any questions about anything during my videos, don't hesitate to reach out and make sure that you understand before we move on, okay? I got a feeling that's it. Assignments are going to be 10% late, but they shouldn't be. Those are an iLearn. You have to turn them in by a certain time on whatever date they're due. And I got a feeling that what I did was I made everything due like incrementally throughout the semester, but also that you have enough time to do a homework assignment and a calculation, take a quiz, and then get the feedback on that moving into the final quiz and exam. Okay? All right, so soil chemical properties. Kind of the core reason of what we're doing here in soils and our soil fertility is that primarily understanding the context of the farming operation that you're going to be on. So if you're a vet, someone comes in and has a problem with their animals and they can't figure it out, they've been doing the same thing. At some point you might want to look back and go, have you had a soil test? What is the nutritive quality of the food that you're feeding them? Maybe there's an issue there. So understanding the context of your farming operation or someone else's farming operation is going to be important. We're going to minimize soil disturbance, so this goes into our soil and water conservation, because if we till our land, we decrease our port, we decrease our structure, and we have the improved chance of soil erosion. In order to minimize the soil erosion, some of the negative impacts that we have with our farming operations, we want to improve crop diversity. And so understanding your soils and the chemical properties of those soils are going to help you maximize crop production, or even just having some grass on your field so that it can either keep the soil in place, or that it might be used as a feed source for animals, or it might be used as a food source for humans. So those kind of three things are why we want to maximize our crop diversity. And that also keeps the soil covered. So if we keep our soil covered, we're not losing the soil into the water, and that also the soil has all our nutrients that are helping our crops grow. So if we can minimize our soil disturbance, we'll minimize nutrient pollution in our waterways. Also maintaining those roots year round, so cover crops. Yeah, okay.
My eye will not stop twitching. It's been twitching for 3 days.
And then finally we're going to integrate livestock. You okay?
Yeah, I'm good.
I mean, if you have to step outside, go ahead and handle your business. I
No.
mean, we're grown here like adults. I promise you, I won't get upset if you have to step outside and take care of something else. Next is the 4R nutrient stewardship. And, well, following along with all those soil properties, when we apply fertilizers to our soils, we want to make sure that we're doing it right. We don't want to put all of our soils, all of our fertilizer out in January, hoping that it will. Misty, you all right? Okay. We don't want to put all our fertilizer out in January, and then by the time we go to plant our crops, it's gone. So we also want to focus on how our soils are going to retain those nutrients so that they don't leave our system. So we want to make sure we apply the right source at the right time. What else, Madison? Phillips?
Right amount.
The right rate, which is the amount. We don't want to over apply. That's why we kind of went over those fertilizer calculations in lab, so that you know that you're not putting 450 pounds of P2O5 because you chose the wrong source. And then finally putting it in at the right place. So if we can keep it in the ground, we can keep it out of the water. So I guess for for the sake of for soil chemical properties, we would be focusing primarily on that we have it in the plant available forms, and that our soil chemical properties can hold those and retain those nutrients. It's one thing to put out a wrong source in the wrong field and kind of go, why didn't I get a crop response? Our soil testing is going to help us understand the nutrient supply that is there so that we don't over apply fertilizers. And then also if there is any other nutrients that might be there that can help us manage our budget better. If there's already nutrients in the soil, we don't have to apply what the soil recommendation is. The timing of the crop uptake and the dynamics of soil nutrient supply, that is more soil fertility, but this is going to be the segue between soils and soil fertility. It's kind of like the intermediate. And then our root soil dynamics, and we want to limit the potential off-field transport. Kind of making sense? So for the right source, we want to make sure that we have the right fertilizer type, making sure that it is something that will turn into or it will be mineralized into a plant available nutrient. We want to make sure that we're applying the right rate or the right amount. Not only does that, we don't want to over apply. Our crops might have a negative response to excessive nutrients in the soil, but it also cuts into our budget. So we're all in the business of not spending all our money. Money, money, money. Okay, that's the 2021. All right. Again, making sure that we apply them when the crop needs them. They don't need them right now. We haven't even planted corn. There's no need to put our fertilizer out. And if the nutrients are not in the soil, then they're in the water. We are trying to promote environmental quality and not and be good stewards of our environment and not pollute it, and also so that we can maximize our use efficiency. So bang for our buck. Everyone good? And these have several different impacts, be it environmental, because we want to promote environmental quality, environmental stewardship. They have economic impacts. That's our money. That's our profit margins. And then finally our social impact, because agriculture kind of gets a bad rap. They believe that we're the ones that are causing all this pollution. Don't worry about all the cars that are driving around. They want to focus on the cows, as if those cows are causing global warming. One interesting thing to note, that I did see a thing in the beginning of COVID where they took satellite imagery of Beijing prior to, I guess, in January before the outbreak hit, and then they took it in like April. And you could see that because there was no car traffic, you could now start to see the city because the smog had dissipated. No change in the greenhouse gas emissions over farmland, but where the cars were, there was a decrease. But they still want to point the thing at agriculture. So we want to try and keep the spotlight off of us and do the best thing that we can. I'm pretty sure I don't need to beat up the fact that we need to feed 9 billion people by 2050. We hit that on every class. The thing is that we need to increase our productivity by 1.1% per year, and it needs to be 60% greater than it was in 2005 and 2007. And that's something that's difficult to do. Like in America, we are already maxed out with our crop productivity. Like, I mean, we are at the top of what we can do. And we're getting the best at it, and we're getting even better. It's kind of like the difference between having a 90 and a 95 in a class. Like, it takes a lot of work to get up to the 95. This is just showing the change in the billions of people in the population, and then at some point in time we will end up being at 9 billion people by 2050. Getting into how our crops are going to function, a long time ago, but even before my time, a gentleman named Justus von Liebig came up with this theory and this idea that the crop yield is proportionate to the amount of the most limiting nutrient. And at first they thought it was just nitrogen or phosphorus or potassium or whichever. Turns out that you can have all of those in sufficient supply, but if you don't have any water, it doesn't get into the plant. If you add all the nutrients to a pot and put a seed in a closet with no light, the nutrients are there, but the crop growth is not going to be as good because plants need sunlight. So all of these things kind of go into how crops are going to be grown, and understanding that the soil chemical properties are going to influence our nutrient retention. I mentioned it in soils class, beat it up in soil fertility. Some of y'all might have remembered or learned it in a different way, but there are about 17, 18, some people might say 20 essential plant nutrients. And the mnemonic that I learned was C. Hopkins Cafe, managed by my cousin, Mokel Nina. C. Hopkins Cafe, managed by my cousin, Mokel Nina. And so this is going to be a test question. Fill in the chart. Not necessarily that you need to know you do not need to know the plant available for, but you do need to know which nutrient it is. Okay, this was for fertility. What's up?
Is magnesium really a macronutrient?
Yeah.
I don't know why I thought it was a micro.
Manganese.
Ah.
And so, excellent point that Madison brought up was that the difference between a macro and a micronutrient is the amount of the quantity that the plant requires in order to be to maximize the yield. So we don't necessarily need a whole lot of boron, but we do need a lot of nitrogen and phosphorus and potassium. Primarily nitrogen. It's going to be the one you apply the most of. And then finally, to a lesser degree, sulfur, calcium, and magnesium. And so calcium and magnesium magnesium is important in chlorophyll. It's the central molecule in chlorophyll. That's why it's a macronutrient. And so how I remember this is that the C. Hopkins Cafe managed, once I take iron out of this and start at the top right here, then I can do by mine cousin Mokel Nina. We tend to find more issues with our micronutrients in livestock management because these micronutrients are also important for metabolic functions within animals and humans as well. We just happen to eat more, especially we can over apply some of these nutrients and get them from different food sources. Cattle, not so much. They eat grass, unless you got a goat. Copper, zinc, molybdenum. Molybdenum, the spelling of that typically tends to get people. I just remembered it molybdenum.
That's definitely how I thought it was pronounced.
Molybdenum. That's okay.
I've never heard anybody say it.
Yeah, I mean, we very rarely use anything with molybdenum. In analytical chemistry, there is some use because it has the properties with oxidation states, but other than that, probably not. And so most of these, and then chlorine, nickel, and sodium. So, C. Hopkins Cafe, iron, managed by my cousin, Local Nina. C. Hopkins Cafe, managed by my cousin, Local Nina. Most of these right here will come as a package. It will be some little packet that a producer throws in the fertilizer blend. About yay big, because these are needed in like 0.5 parts per million or 100 parts per billion. We're talking very, very small amounts for our plants. Good? Jacob? You in? Cool. Alright. And so the reason these are important is because of this chart right here, that if we have a nutrient deficiency, our plants will not grow. So we can add these nutrients to the soil, we will get a crop response, but only so much. And based upon your soil type is how you need to know how much fertilizer you need to apply. Or sometimes if you even need to apply it in several applications. And so when we're talking about like a kaolinite that has a CEC of about 15 or negative 15, you have to apply that fertilizer in smaller kind of spoon-fed applications. But if you have a smectite that can hold on to 200 centimoles of charge, then you can apply all of your fertilizer at once and it'll retain it, kind of more like a sponge. We want to make sure we get to the critical range and the critical concentration, which is where we are starting to lose our crop response. And so anything in here, you know, if 1 ton is good, then 2 tons is better, right? Not necessarily, though. We start getting into this law of diminishing returns. And you can throw all the nitrogen you want to at corn, but it's only going to take up so much. Like, it has a threshold. It is not a linear 1 pound equals 1 bushel. Because if not, we'd be throwing 1,000 pounds of corn and we would have 1,000 bushels per acre. So, just doesn't quite work that way. Good on this? Sufficient. When yield will not increase, I was just talking about this law of diminishing returns, when yield will not increase when we add more of these essential nutrients, but the tissue concentration can increase. So it will still take it up, but it is not doing anything to benefit the overall optimum yield. We can have excessive application or causing a toxicity when the concentration becomes so high that it reduces plant growth and yield. And so we can apply too much nitrogen and our crops will grow and they will lodge. And if it's on the ground, and it's not getting into the combine. And then this luxury consumption is kind of along the same lines with the sufficient, where the plant tissue concentration can increase. It just doesn't necessarily provide a benefit. As I was mentioning before, this law of diminishing returns, we have a deficiency, we do a soil test, soil says, hey, you need to apply 175 pounds of K2O using a 0060, how many pounds do I need? You apply that, you get some response in this corn yield, but if you apply more than that, you have wasted money because the yield can only get so much. Like, I think one of the problems that I have with our thought process towards maximizing yield is that I'm only going to grow to be 5'10". It doesn't matter what you do. I'm only going to grow, my genetics are only going to allow me to be 5'10". I can maybe put on a little bit of extra weight, I can take some weight off, but you can't make me grow anymore. And we can only make our crops grow so much. They are only capable, their genetic background is only capable of so much. So while throwing the nutrients at it doesn't necessarily guarantee that you will get some yield response from that. Now you're cutting into your profit margin, and it doesn't matter what yield you have, you've now lost money. So most of this class and kind of getting into fertility and bring this back together is that our soil solution and the soil chemical properties within that are important for our nutrient uptake. Primarily nutrient uptake. When we talk about clay mineralogy and cation exchange, the exchange of cations and anions is going to be directly related to nutrient uptake. Mineral solubility is going to be kind of that right source, when we get back to that right source, making sure that when we apply this fertilizer, that it will undergo the reactions that create a plant available nutrient in a plant available form. Drainage management is going to be important, because if your soils are waterlogged, it is going to change the chemical makeup of the nutrients, and if they're not in a plant available form, that going all the way back to that table, then they will not be in the plant. Organic matter and microbes are going to be important. They're the ones that are going to do all the mineral solubility and mobilization and mineralization. And then finally, the microbes also need air in order to breathe and continue to do those things. Almost there, y'all. Couple more slides. So, a clay colloid being one of the smallest particles of soil, but it is the most reactive. It is where we get the negative charge from, and it is capable of holding all of our C. Hopkins Cafe, managed by Mine Cousin Mokelnina, elements. While most of these show that there is a negative charge, we also have some potential to have positive charges in there. But the overall net charge of soils is?
The overall net charge of the soil is negative.
Negative, correct. It is negative. Overall net charge. Cation exchange is going to be something that between these negative charges that hold on to some of our cations, and there's going to be this exchange into the roots. This is what we talked about in soil fertility. We will not go over this part where it goes into the plant, but we will be talking about the chemical properties that govern and kind of regulate the exchange of these cations and anions. You got any hand sanitizer? Does anybody have any hand sanitizer?
I don't have it. Sanitary.
Adsorption, desorption. It was adsorbed with a D, adsorbed to my finger or some clay particle. That cation can desorb off of my finger and be adsorbed to another clay particle. With a D, adsorption. Absorption, I'll let y'all finish with them. Copy in the definition. That was absorbed into my skin. I cannot get that back out. Adsorption from one to another. Absorption is movement of a substance into another. So plants, soil absorbs nutrients. Plants absorb nutrients. Make sense? You'll see me use that in soil class again. That's the best way that I know to explain that, is that a nutrient can be exchanged through cation exchange capacity. Adsorption. And in soil science, we keep it pretty simple. Like, you can almost look into a definition or into a word or a term and go, huh, cation exchange capacity, the capacity of a soil to exchange cations. But scientists are real finicky, and that definition doesn't necessarily encompass everything that cation exchange capacity is, and so they want this interchange on the surface of, because that is technically adsorption. And then finally, the anion exchange capacity, the capacity of the soil to exchange anions. And those are going to be things like our nitrates, phosphates, sulfates, chlorine. When you go back to that C. Hopkins Cafe, managed by my cousin Mokel Nina table. Oh, you know what I didn't do? Can I get some more? Where can you still see me at? Or at least it's tape. You cannot see
I can
the
see
tape
the
at all?
tape.
Right here? Well,
Come, stay inside the black.
Well, I mean, I can't. I guess I can. Okay. I've fallen over it and caught myself. So I have a piece of tape. I have a piece of tape on my finger, and I have some hand sanitizer in my hand. So adsorption with a D, A-D-S-O-R-P-T-O, and is going to be the exchange of this piece of tape off of my finger onto the screen. My finger being one soil colloid, the screen being another soil colloid. Cation exchange capacity is the capacity for that exchange to happen. So cations can be exchanged back and forth between two colloids. However, the hand sanitizer I know that looks like magic, right? I can't get that back out of my skin. That is absorption with a B. So soils have the ability to exchange both cations and anions. Cations being positive, attached to a negative particle or a negative charge on a soil particle, and anions being nitrate and sulfate, phosphate, a negatively charged negatively charged ion onto a positively charged surface of a soil particle. Remember, the overall net charge is negative, but there are some positive sites on soil colloids. That's all I got. Yay! It's the weekend. Thank y'all so much for showing up. Remember, again, I will be here every Friday. Same bat time, same bat channel, 11:15 to 12:10-ish. I do hope to see you in person at some point in time during this semester. But again, you are not required. Thank you so much for your time. Y'all have a great weekend.